All right, why don't we get started, folks? Welcome. I'm going to call this meeting to order of the Polk County Board of Commissioners. Today is Tuesday, November 28th. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, are there any comments for items not on the agenda today? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of November 21st?
Also move.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Next up, we have Star Recognition Award. The crowd in the room is probably here for this, I'm guessing.
We love having authority, but we're here for that.
So the commissioners issue this award quarterly for examples of exemplary service. And today we'd like to recognize Abby Warren, who was nominated by Brent Demo, Mr. Brent Demo. And I'm going to read Brent's words here on the record. And thank you for being concise. Appreciate that. All right, thanks for being here, Abby. So Abby has worked for FCO for 5 years and was recently promoted to the Community Training and Education Supervisor. She now supervises the prevention team, Mid-Valley Parenting, is the lead for Polk County on the Mid-Valley Suicide Prevention Coalition, and she also coordinates the County Service Integration Program, which has previously been a separate full-time position. Here are just a few programmatic highlights about Abby's work. She brought in over $40,000 in grant funding for suicide prevention work. She organized the first ever Polk County Youth Conference at Western Oregon University that had 400 local youth in attendance. She co-chaired the Polk County Holiday Project, which served a record number of families, 1,700 total. Coordinated the annual Early Learning Conference, which for the first time incorporated Spanish-speaking trainers for our monolingual childcare providers. And Brent thinks it's worth mentioning that Abby is also bilingual and plays a key role in translating material for the department. I didn't know that. Abby's willingness to help and support our FCO team, her staff, and the community goes above and beyond what is asked of her. She's a bright light to our team, bringing smiles, laughter, and energy to the work that she does every day. So on behalf of the board, we are excited to recognize Abby Warren for the Star Recognition Award. Thanks for all that you do.
We commonly have a speech process.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Set aside 24 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, that's easiest. I don't want to.
That's not right there.
Back here.
Just sit there, right?
Chairs. Thank you.
I got it.
Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Man, we're just. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome.
Nothing you want to say? You're good?
Have you ever seen it?
Thank you so much. It's awesome to be part of the team and look at the support that I have on the best team. So thank you for your support for everything.
And we hear from the community too, Abby.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Exit stage left. Yes, sir.
Keep up the good work, everybody.
Thank you. You guys.
Sure, they all leave for your presentation. Gives. Well, why don't you come on up? Next up on the agenda, we have the West Valley Housing Authority update. Jessica and Christian, please join us. How you doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
As most of you know, I think I've met with you all individually over the years. I'm director of the West Valley Housing Authority, and I'm sure most of you know Jessica, but
Yes, I'm Jessica Blakely. I'm the current board chair for West Valley Housing Authority. Been almost 6 years now.
Yeah, amazing. So we heard that the board was interested in an update on what was happening at the Housing Authority, and some of this might be a little remedial. I know, like I say, I've spoken with you guys in the past, so excuse me if I go over things that you're well aware of already, but I just wanted to kind of set the groundwork for where we are as an agency and who we are. So first and foremost, there we go. I just wanted to reiterate our mission. It's a pretty vanilla boilerplate mission. Never really been made more dynamic than what it is, but most housing authorities serve the local community in providing affordable housing to those in need. One thing we added that might be a little different than other housing authorities, and this was added, back in 2000, well before my time, was promoting efforts towards self-sufficiency. And I think at the time, the thought was, we should really try to enhance people's ability to move on beyond needing affordable housing. So our traditional core programs, we have the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is our largest program. We have up to 775 vouchers allocated to the agency. Does that mean that we can lease up 775 vouchers? No, that does not. The way HUD works is they provide an allocation of funding based on what they anticipate or what they think the housing authority should need. And then we also have that baseline of 775 vouchers. So we have to play with how much money they give us and how much we can use to actually support the vouchers out in the community. Right now, we are trending at about 498 vouchers that we have out in the community. Since December of 2022, we've been in what they call a leasing potential, meaning that we have more funding than we have vouchers out on the street. This has been an ongoing challenge for the agency. We have monthly meetings with the HUD field office about ways we can improve our leasing. Part of the issue has been, we've had some staffing issues. We had a caseworker vacancy for about 6 months, then hired somebody that came on for about 4 months and then left us, and then we were vacant. That position remained vacant for another 9 months after that. So it's just been a challenge to fill that position. I will say that position was filled back in July, and that individual is coming up to full speed now with her caseload. So that's helped us buoy up those numbers a little bit with the vouchers that are out in utilization out in the community. So that's why we're at the 498 now. Over the last 6 to 7 months, we were trending around 465 vouchers that were out in the street. So we've seen an improvement since the addition of this person to our staff. And then we have our public housing units, which we own 353 units in West Salem, Dallas, and Independence. And I provided a breakdown of where those are and how those comprise a total of 353 units. And then we have a family self-sufficiency program. So we have one person on staff that's paid through a grant that we received through HUD. And you'll see in the financials, I didn't include that because it's basically a wash in and a wash out. The funds from the grant pay for the position, and there's really no net difference. So I didn't include that in the financials. The overview, I've kind of gone over that already, but the voucher system assists people that are earning 50% or below area median income. And I have a chart available if anybody's interested in that figure. It's considered very low income people in the community, 50% or below. And basically, it provides a voucher to an individual that can go out into the community and use that voucher with a private landlord to secure a unit for rent. And in turn, they pay 30% of their adjusted gross monthly income towards their portion of rent. And then the housing authority generally picks up the rest. And that would include potentially utility allowance as well, depending on the individual's income. So where we are right now, like I said, we have some different funding sources for our vouchers. We have, I don't know, do you guys have a laser pointer? Or? Yeah. If you look under vouchers utilized, we have a separate program that we consider targeted funding, and that is a breakdown of the funds over in the right column or in the right chart. We have RAD PBVs. We have 8 of those, and those are for our townhomes here on Walnut Avenue. We have 10 family unification vouchers. We have 15 emergency housing vouchers, 20 mainstream and 20 BASH vouchers. So in the targeted funding, we're trending right about where our limits are. We might have a deficit of 1 to 2 that are not under lease currently. But if you look at our regular program, we're at 437 and we have 702 available. So the thought is, wow, the housing authority is underperforming. Why don't you guys have 702 families out there with vouchers? And again, like I said, we're limited with the funding that HUD provides. So we have to play within the parameters of what HUD provides. In a perfect world, it would be, okay, HUD would say, you have 702 vouchers, please utilize these 702 vouchers. Tell us how much it's going to cost and we'll reimburse you. Well, that's not how it works. They just say, you have 702 vouchers, but you only have $4.1 million. So if we're trending at $700 a unit in assistance, we can only help so many families. We can't get to the full 702 families. I will say that we are trending behind funding available by about 30 to 35 vouchers. And the challenge has been a lot of individuals that we submit an eligibility letter to, meaning that we pulled you off the wait list and you're potentially eligible for a housing choice voucher if we work you through the process and you meet all the income requirements and all of the other regulation requirements to receive a voucher. A lot of people aren't responding. We can send out 100 and we might get 53 responses back. Of those 53, maybe 32 provide the actual documentation that we need. And then out of that 32, maybe 23 are actually successful in providing everything we need and receiving a voucher at the end of the process. Take that a little bit further, and those 23 families that have a voucher, maybe 12 are successful in actually leasing up with a voucher, and we give them 120 days to find a unit. So the challenge has been a general apathy in submitting paperwork, inability to find units that are deemed reasonable rent or meet the criteria of the program. And sometimes even when they find a unit, we go out and do an inspection and it doesn't pass the inspection, the landlord says, I don't want to do the repairs. And at that point, there's really nothing we can do other than, okay, move to the next unit available. So we've had some challenges in that regard. As I said, we've been in leasing potential status for the last 8 to 9 months, well, 11 months. And we need to push to get the leasing up by at least 30 units per month. Not 30 units per month cumulative, but 30 units per month on average carrying forward. What has happened over this past year as a result of us underutilizing the funding, we've had an offset of $167,000, meaning HUD has taken back $167,000 out of our baseline program. What that implication is moving forward, we could potentially not be able to serve as many families. If we can't prove that we have a need for these vouchers and we have a need for these funds, HUD's going to start allocating that money to other housing authorities that can prove that. I wouldn't say it's for a lack of trying on the part of housing authority staff, but it's just been a challenge for us with, like I say, vacancies amongst staff and just general. I don't know. It seems like since the pandemic, people have just been generally apathetic about following through with things, filling out their paperwork. We've had that same issue with people that are on the program that have to go through their annual renewal certification process. All they have to provide us is their income information and their accounts, bank accounts. We can't even get that from them in their annuals. I serve as a hearings officer. A lot of people request a hearing saying it's not fair that you terminated me for not complying with the program. They come before me, I tell them, we have no interest in making you homeless. Just provide us this documentation. I'll give you an additional 10 days. Maybe 1 out of 3 people actually bring that documentation to us so we can make sure that they continue to receive their voucher. I don't know what more we can do other than fill the paperwork out for them, and that's obviously not an option for us. So that's been a challenge in our housing choice voucher program.
Before you move
Yes,
back,
I'm not very adept at this. Yeah. Okay.
thank you. So you have a lot of acronyms up there.
Yes.
And so I don't know what a RAD PBV is.
Okay.
I don't know what family unification means.
Right.
Mainstream or VASH. So please give us, since we're on the record, those watching, and have a sense of understanding of what those things mean. And then on the chart to the left, if I'm confused right now, I've heard you say the applicants are failing to perform adequately for you all to do what you need to do. Okay, I get that. So I don't really understand the 62 number against the 437 number. It feels like what I understand is 62 is all you can afford to cover.
Okay.
But that, I don't sense, I guess that's not true.
No.
Okay.
I'm happy to explain that. So I did include in the packet beforehand, kind of an overview of the programs, because there's a lot of tedious information, but I'm happy to go over each one for you. So up here where it says 62, those are targeted funding. So targeted funding means we have 20 units that are VASH, and they receive funding through the Veterans Administration Supportive Housing Program. That's what VASH stands for. Those are vouchers that are administered by the Housing Authority in conjunction with the local VA. So the VA has a caseload of individuals, veterans that are experiencing homeless instability or, you know, stability with their homelessness or with their housing. And they submit that individual to our particular wait list for the VASH. So it's a separate program receiving separate funding, but it's still administered as the same as the rest of the program for the vouchers. So we have 20 of those, and those are for veterans only, and those are referred to us from the local VA. And that's of those 62. In addition to the 20 VASH, we have 20 mainstream vouchers. And that's a separate pot of money that's provided by HUD. And that's those are vouchers available to non-elderly, meaning that the individuals are under the age of 62, and or there's a member who is designated disabled in the household. So they are in our regular wait list, but we have markers that indicate whether they are non-elderly and have a disabled member in their household. So they're eligible for mainstream. We can search through our list. When a mainstream voucher becomes available, we can actually bypass other people on the list because that funding is specifically targeted for those individuals that are non-elderly and or have a disabled individual in the household. So that's another 20. So that's 40 out of the 62. On top of that, we have 15 emergency housing vouchers. These were allocated to the Housing Authority under President Biden's American Recovery Act in 2021. These are available for up to 15 families that are either homeless, at risk of becoming homeless, are victims of domestic violence, or were previously homeless. So there's 4 categories. This is targeted funding that's provided to the Housing Authority, but we must work with our local COC, which is the Marion Polk Community of Care or Continuum of Care, yes. And in turn, they have reportees to them. Who's reporting to them is the Mid-Willamette Valley Community Action Agency, the Center for Hope and Safety, Sable House, all service providers that are in the realm of homelessness and or domestic violence. So they're making a referral of individuals that they feel meet the criteria to the local COCC, who then in turn refers them to the Housing Authority. They go on our wait list, and we can go through and parse out the wait list and pull those people up ahead of other people if we're using this targeted funding for the emergency housing vouchers.
Is that just for the emergency housing vouchers, or do you have priority, do you serve priority populations in the regular program as well?
We traditionally have had preferences. One of the preferences was victims of domestic violence. I think that was our principal preference.
Why
We
is
had
that
some-
in the past?
That was in the past, and we had some issues with that. It seemed like we had a lot of people working around trying to get in because they knew that that would circumvent or shortlist them on the wait list. And it just became a problem. So we ended up, and the veracity of whether or not those claims were accurate. I mean, we were getting very generic letters from the service providers. We decided as a group to take that preference out of our administrative plan. So right now, the only preference we have is we realized that there was an issue with people getting on the wait list and wanting to immediately use their voucher in Portland or King County or somewhere other than Polk County. Because they realized that, for one, West Valley Housing Authority's wait list is open, which some housing authorities close their wait list because they get so many people on the list, they just can't continue to process 10, 15,000 people on their wait list. We've never closed our wait list. Relative to other housing authorities, our wait list can be fairly short. I mean, it's 2 to 3 years, but if you look at other housing authorities, I know Salem's is probably 6 to 7 or more years for their wait list. So we were having a problem with people outside the area coming in and getting on the wait list, getting their voucher, immediately wanting to use it outside the area. Well, we're not then serving the people of Polk County, and that's what we're chartered to do, is serve Polk County. So we recently, within the last year, added a preference for local, a local preference. HUD will allow you to do that, but you can't say that you have to live here exclusively. It can be you want to move to Polk County or you have employment in Polk County. So that's one preference that we've initiated. In addition to that, we've had a longstanding preference for people that were displaced due to natural disaster, which has served well for like the Santiam Canyon fire. We've also had a preference for individuals that were displaced from some other assistance program like public housing or Section 8 from another housing authority, which doesn't normally happen, but it could happen if a housing authority got into shortfall or had to cut back on their number of families because they've lost the financial wherewithal to serve that number of families. So getting back to your question, Commissioner Pope, we had 20, like I say, we have 20 VASH, 20 mainstream, 15 emergency housing. So that we're up to what, 55. And then on top of that, we have 10 vouchers that are targeted for the family unification program. And this is a targeted funding that we work with DHS fairly exclusively on. It's for families that have an imminent or at imminent risk of having their children placed in childcare or in foster care, and or there's a delay in the DHS discharging their children back to them just because they don't have a stable housing environment. In addition to that, we do have the FUP program does cover up to 36 months for individuals that are aging out of foster care. So 18-year-olds do have the opportunity to receive a family unification program. Sounds odd to use that nomenclature, family unification program, but it's for them to move forward from foster care and start out on their own with some assistance. So we're up to 65. I'm sorry, the family unification program isn't, I didn't account for it, right? And then we have the project-based vouchers, which are a new development for us. And that's something that we talked about later on in the presentation. We received 8 of those as a part of a rental assistance demonstration that we conducted on our 20 units of townhomes on Walnut here by the main office. So that comprises the total of 62. So those are targeted funds.
That's RAD.
Okay, so RAD is what they call, it's HUD's, what they call a rental assistance demonstration. And it came about in about 2010. There was kind of a general wave of public housing is becoming old, dilapidated, and there's not enough funds available to rehabilitate these properties that were built from 1937 on, when the original act was enacted by Franklin Roosevelt. So the concept was, the problem with public housing is HUD has their hand in it. So we can't do anything with public housing. We can't go out and say, we'd like to receive private financing to rehabilitate this property that's 50 years old and the plumbing's deteriorating, sewer's deteriorating. So what they came up with was this concept of, okay, what if we allow them to take them from public housing and move them to Section 8, utilizing some kind of a voucher assistance, whether it's project-based vouchers or RAD project-based vouchers. So we undertook that process and we've been successful in converting our 20 units of townhomes from the public housing arena, section 8. And in that, 8 of those received RAD project-based vouchers. Those are restricted by HUD. They provide us what the rent will be for those units. They're all 2-bedroom units. Their rent is $873. And HUD dictates what those rents will be, like I said. And we can only rent those to individuals that are at 50% of area median income or below. So
As you perform more RAD conversions, you'll in theory achieve more project-based vouchers that'll hold those units.
yes, so these vouchers are actually added to our baseline. They're not taken out of the
There,
baseline.
okay, they're not part of your,
So HUD gives us an additional, in
okay.
this case, 8 RAD-based project-based vouchers.
Could you talk a little bit more about that conversion process, what you have on the horizon? Are you converting all of the public housing?
Yeah, it's in the overall presentation here. I don't
Okay,
want to get
got
too
it.
far afield.
Okay, why don't we let you finish? And then,
It'll be weird to kind of unwind and rewind
Okay.
what's moving forward,
Perfect.
but I don't know if I've met all of
Yes,
your
thank you.
questions, Commissioner Polk.
Yep. Again, I don't want to, I asked a lot of these questions for the benefit of the audience who's watching this on YouTube. And they might not have, in fact, not always have
Right.
the actual slides in front of them. So,
That makes sense.
but if they do, I want them to be able to understand what these acronyms mean. And a lot of this stuff goes by folks in a blur, and then they make up their own story.
Right.
So.
And that makes
I
sense.
want
And
the
I,
facts.
that's one component I didn't think about that you have YouTube watchers. I did bring copies in case there was anybody in the audience that also wanted to follow along. So something to consider moving into the future. But thank you for those questions. So moving along with the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Financially, you'll see, and I apologize, I think the handout is a little out of order, but I included the actual income statement in paper form because these numbers are pretty hard to read. If you look at the Housing Choice Vouchers Program income statement, you'll see that under operating revenue, we are actually, this is year to date, so it's the first 3 quarters of 2023. So I kind of wanted to give a snapshot of how we're performing right now this year. We are $62,000 over in expenses. So our net operating income is -62. Obviously, as a program, we would like that to be 0 or somewhat in the positive. So that shows that we are having an issue with our voucher program, which we are not refuting here. We brought forth that we're really under leased by about 30 households per month, which is something we are working on right now to overcome. And some of the concepts to overcome that is we have partnered with the Polk County Family and Community Outreach. Again, like I said, we've had some staffing issues. We're a very small agency. We don't have a lot of resources. And we have seen that other housing authorities have been very successful with housing navigators. And housing navigators are people with a position relegated to simply helping people find houses that they can use their vouchers with. We don't have that opportunity. We realize that Polk County Family and Community Outreach has already established kind of a network of that. They had about 5 employees at the time doing that. In talking with Brent Moe, we came to an agreement that we would pay for 1 full-time position at the county for that to happen. So we, in essence, have an employee at the county. They're not ours, but in essence, we're paying for an employee at the county for them to serve that capacity as a family resource navigator, resource connector, and a navigator. We have been doing that since October of last year. We've seen a tremendous improvement with the number of people being successful in leasing up with their vouchers. In turn, we pay about $88,000 a year, which is equivalent to a full-time employee based on Brent Moe's estimation. And one nice addition to that is each quarter we provide them with $5,000 of housing authority, housing choice voucher funds that were restricted that we can't be flexible with. But once we hand it over to the county, they can be flexible with it. And they can use it to pay extra deposits, pay for application fees, pay utility arrearages, anything that they feel is a barrier for the particular families that they're working with. That's been incredibly successful for us. We committed to 2 years. We've completed our first year as of this last October, so we have another year to go through. And I don't foresee us having any reason to not continue that moving forward unless we have issues with financing. In conjunction with that, we are exploring opportunities for landlords out in the community that may be interested in project-based vouchers. And what that means is we say, okay, we're willing to project-base up to 30 vouchers. Those vouchers come out of our 702. And how that benefits the housing authority is they're not just floating around and people go and try to find a unit. They're connected to a unit. So that unit will not be leased without that voucher being used. So that would assist the housing authority in utilizing our vouchers tremendously, like it has with our townhomes. And we already have project-based, in addition to the 8 RAD PBVs, we have 12, so there's 20 units. We did 8 RAD PBV, meaning HUD is telling us what the rents are, and then we did 12, the remainder, in project-based vouchers coming out of our baseline. So we just buoyed our numbers up by 12 by tying them to those additional 12 units of townhomes. So
Those
those
12.
units will not lease without that voucher being utilized.
Those 12 are currently connected to units?
They're currently connected to unit. Well, the HAP contract is being signed and it will start December 1st. The redevelopment of the townhomes was just completed at the end of October. So we're going through a major lease up with the remaining units that were vacant during the rehabilitation process. So we have out of the 20, we have 13 leased up. So we have 7 more that we're working to lease up, and those will need to be leased up by the end of December. There's been some challenges with that just because there's low-income housing tax credit issues and stuff that we have to deal with in that regard as well. And to carry forward the experience we've had with our housing choice voucher applicants and program participants, we're having the same problem with our low-income housing tax credit applicants, getting the documentation that we need. With the low-income housing tax credit program, we have to do third-party verification with everything, including bank accounts. So it's been a little bit of a challenge working with the local banks and employers to get that third-party verification. But we're working through that process right now. The public housing, as I said, we have 160 units at Pioneer Village, 100 at Kingwood West. Those are 2 properties that are in West Salem. We don't generally operate within the urban growth boundary of the city of Salem, but these properties were actually under development before the city of Salem Housing Authority chartered to become a housing authority. In the state of Oregon, city housing authorities trump county housing authorities. So we have no jurisdiction in the city of Salem, even though West Salem falls under Polk County. We have a intergovernmental agreement that we can operate these 2 properties because they were already in under development before the housing authority chartered in the city of Salem. In Dallas, we have the Lockreal Manor, which is a 4-story high-rise behind our office down there off of Donald Street. We have 2 homes on Fur Villa, which were built in 2005. And those are right adjacent to the new development there that used to be the drive-in theater. In Independence, we have 20 units at Harper Court, and we have 9 units at Ash Street. So that comprises our total of public housing. Public housing, we're operating just fine. We don't have any issues with our resources or our net operating income. In fact, we just received our MAS report, which is the management assessment subsystem. So HUD looks at how each housing authority is performing with their public housing. And we received high performer status. So we have no concerns with public housing. And then the family self-sufficiency program, I provided an overview here. I don't want to read it. But basically, it's a voluntary program. Anybody that has a voucher or is on our public housing program may make the selection to participate in the family self-sufficiency program. We have 1 individual on staff that's paid for through a grant to administer the program. And basically, it's a family coaching program. And the idea is to provide these families with resources to become economically self-sufficient. How they get there is a different story for each family. Ultimately, the goal is they establish a 5-year goal. But what is their goal? And it can be, they want to be a homeowner in 5 years. They want to improve their education. They want to get a degree. They want to get an associate's. They want to start their own business. Or it could ultimately be they just want to have more resources at the end of 5 years to determine what they want to do with it. There's no specific requirement that they meet as far as home ownership or starting a business. Some of the things we see most likely, like I say, are starting a business, furthering their education. Oftentimes families are just interested in potentially buying a car that they can depend on. So we have 34 families participating in this program right now. In order for us to receive funding, we have to have at least 25 families participating. And HUD makes the assumption that one FSS coordinator can serve up to 50 households. So we're a little behind in what we can serve, but we've had the same problem we've had with our other programs. We've had kind of a general disinterest in people participating in this program. I don't know if it's because there are quarterly requirements, they report quarterly as to how well they're performing and whether they're meeting their goals and objectives that we set throughout the year. But it's been a little bit of a challenge getting people to participate in the family self-sufficiency program. Those people that do get on the program love it and actually end up being quite successful. So I think there's an opportunity for us to potentially increase participation in this program, but we're still trying to figure out how we can improve the outcome of the number of people applying for or participating in the family self-sufficiency program. So those were our core programs. In addition to our core programs, we do have some affordable housing, and most housing authorities have moved into this arena just because there's a need for the housing authority to be a little more independent. And by independent, I just mean having other financial resources that aren't basically you begging HUD to open up the purse and provide funding. Affordable housing, the proceeds that we receive from affordable housing are not restricted, so we can use them for other resources. We can also use them to augment or fill in where there's deficiencies. We own right now, with the conversion of the 20 townhomes, we co-own the 20 townhomes, so we are managing those. And then we have 9 additional units that we own outright. 8 of those are 4 duplexes in Independence, and 1 of them is a house in West Salem that's right adjacent to our 100-unit complex right there at the on-ramp to Salem-Dallas Highway. And it's right in front of Kingwood West, next to Capitol Manor. So we are also realizing net operating income from our operations of our affordable housing. And like I said, these resources are available for us to use in other areas of the housing authority because they are not restricted. Over the years, we have built quite a substantial amount of reserves with these funds. Doesn't mean that we can use those. I mean, we do have them earmarked for some of the improvements needed for these houses and duplexes that have been in operation since the early 80s. So moving on to new endeavors and kind of getting to your point, Mr. Gordon. So I've spoken before of the repositioning of assets, and that is basically the process of the rental assistance demonstration that we've been entertaining. We've been doing this since about 2018. We initially sought to select a consultant to assist in this process. There's a lot of ins and outs with HUD, and there's a lot of information that has to be presented to HUD, and we just don't have the bandwidth with our staff. So we sought to, in 2018, we sought to secure a consultant. And we were successful. We put out a solicitation and we selected CBR Associates. And we have been under contract with them since about 2019. Subsequent to that, we needed a development partner because obviously we aren't developers. In coordination with CBR Associates, we selected McCormick, Baron Salazar as our developer. So they served as the developer on the townhomes and they made the selection of the architect and with our input and the selection of the contractor. The architect was Salazar Architects out of Portland, no connection to McCormick, Baron Salazar, and the contractor was Walsh Construction. So they started, well, and then we, in order for us to receive funding for these newer projects after RAD conversion, we needed to establish a nonprofit or a nonprofit arm of the Housing Authority. In 2021, we established what we call Affordable Housing of West Valley Incorporated. So we have West Valley Housing Authority and Affordable Housing of West Valley. We have a separate board for the Affordable Housing of West Valley. It is essentially the executive staff at the Housing Authority and the current chair of the Housing Authority was to serve as the board for the nonprofit incorporated. And then after we've kind of put all these in place, we had to apply to HUD to receive approval to convert these projects from public housing to a Section 8 product or some derivative thereof. We did so and received approval over 2021 and 22. So moving forward, we moved into the implementation phase. So the first property ended up being the townhomes, as we've spoken of before. And we had to establish a rehabilitation plan for that project, secure financing, and then receive HUD's release of their declaration of trust on the property. We applied for 4% low-income housing tax credits from Oregon Housing and Community Services. We were successful in 2021. Well, in 2022, and then we commenced the construction in October of 2022 and completed that, just like I said, in October of 2023. We are now currently in the process of leasing that property out. So our next property, which we've been working in conjunction with the first plan, our second property was the Lockreal Manor, which is a 4-story high-rise behind us. So these properties were built in the late 60s, and so they're at 50 years or more in age. And the main systems, which would be like your plumbing, electrical, sewer, roofing, building envelope, after 50 years, you really need to start making some enhancements to these projects and or a complete renovation. That's where we are with the high rise. We've taken care of it over the years. It's a concrete structure, so it's been pretty stable. The other issues that have come up, especially in contemplating these conversions, is seismic retrofits. So with these concrete buildings, there's a concern that with a Cascadia event, they could crumble like paper mache. So that has been a whole other dynamic to our rehabilitation process and plan, is to make sure that all these properties meet current seismic improvement requirements, which is extremely expensive and does take away from the overall polish and finish on the units. The townhomes received a complete renovation, but there were a few things that we were unable to accomplish. And those were relining the main sewer line, replacement of windows because they were replaced back in 2010, and replacement of exterior doors. The reason we couldn't do that was because of these seismic retrofits that ended up being extremely costly. But where we are with the high rise is in 2022, we applied for 9% tax credits through Oregon Housing and Community Services. And we were unsuccessful in garnering an award for those funds. In 2023, we applied for 4% tax credits. There were 13 applicant parties and only 4 were funded. We were unsuccessful in receiving funding for that project. So where we are right now is we're awaiting HUD's or Oregon Housing and Community Services next announcement of funding availability for preservation of units. And we anticipate that to come here in the first quarter of 2024. The issue we've had in receiving funding for the high rise is, as some of you may know, the governor has kind of changed her priorities as far as where she wants the state to be with affordable housing. That priority being, she would like to see 36,000 new affordable housing units developed. So the focus is more on new development, not so much on preservation. That does not mean that OHCS does not have funds for preservation, but there's just a lot of competition for those funds. The other issue we've been contending with is we are choosing to take these 60 units out of an assisted affordable housing program, which is public housing, and move it to another affordable housing program. Their priority right now at Oregon Housing is to make sure that they retain units that might lose their affordable housing. So if it's a mod rehab project or it has a Section 8 contract that's expiring and they put in for application, they're going to be much more successful than we are in application with a high rise. So we have a challenge in receiving funding for the 4-story high rise. The concerning part is the elevator is original to the building. We only have 1 elevator for the 4-story building. It runs with analog equipment, and it is very difficult to find replacement parts when something goes wrong. In spring of 2021, it was down for 7 weeks because we could not get the parts to replace and repair the elevator. On top of that,
And I'm confident you're in violation of ADA hour 1.
Yeah.
Just wanted to add that in, little drama there.
Yeah. So it's incredibly important for us to continue to push to receive funding to rehabilitate the project. One of the major repairs would be the elevator at a cost of about $690,000. And then our third phase that we've established, but have not really moved forward with, other than some preliminary feasibility and architectural due diligence, is our 100-unit complex in West Salem. And it's right next to Capitol Manor. And again, since we're waiting to receive funding for the high rise, we have not moved forward with attempting to receive funding for the Kingwood West. So we've stalled out on those 2 projects. One of our other components of this repositioning of our public housing assets was we had 4 single-family homes. 2 of those were the Fur Villa homes on Fur Villa. We had another 2 homes on Laura Lane that each sat on approximately a half an acre of property, which is extremely challenging for low-income people to maintain a half an acre of property in a single-family home. On top of that, it was extremely challenging for the Housing Authority to maintain lease compliance because we don't have access to premises like we would a multifamily property where we could walk the grounds. Historically, the Housing Authority has slowly divested of all of their single-family homes. At one point, they owned 9 single-family homes. And these 2 were remaining, and we opted to dispose of those 2 homes. The sale of those 2 homes occurred in October, and we've closed, and HUD has transferred or signed off on the deed of trust. It's completely transferred out of our possession. We have received the proceeds of those funds. Just because we sold them does not mean the funds become totally unrestricted. There's still a restriction on those funds. We can use them for Section 8 or Section 9 activities. And when I say Section 8 or Section 9, those are sections of the 1937 United States Housing Act, which established affordable housing as we know it. Section 8 is what promulgated the voucher program. Section 9 is what promulgated the public housing units that have been in place since the late 30s, early 40s. What we intend to use those funds for is obviously moving forward, potential development, acquisition of an existing property. So with the 2 homes, we received about $670,000 for 2 of the homes. And that money has been put in an investment account. We will have that available to us if and when the opportunity to move forward with the acquisition or a new development comes along. So once we get through the three phases, and like I say, we've stalled out at phase 2 and phase 3. The last component will be, we will then be under 250 units in public housing. And HUD allows for housing authorities with units under 250 to what they call a voluntary conversion, meaning that we just ask HUD for the opportunity to convert away from public housing with those units. The nice thing about that is there's no pressure to make sure we have a plan for rehabilitation. There's no pressure to make sure that we have financing in place. We can just convert them, which gives us a little more breathing room to determine what is the best course of action for those remaining units. And that would be the 160 units that is Pioneer Village in West Salem, the 20 units that is Arbor Court in Independence, and the 9 units that's Ash Creek in Independence. So moving forward, what the Housing Authority is currently seeking to endeavor is the potential of acquisition and development. We would like to assist Polk County in providing additional affordable housing. We kind of want to break through just providing vouchers and public housing. There's an incredible need for affordable housing in the area. That need is being fulfilled to some degree by Polk Community Development Corporation and other private developers. But we would love the opportunity to also throw our hat in the ring for development and or acquisition of existing properties. And not necessarily for the purpose of building an empire, but at least establishing an alternative resource for the Housing Authority that doesn't have restricted funds and allows us a little more flexibility in how we use those funds. And moving forward, some of that could be driven by what we're experiencing in the current environment. Maybe it's addressing homelessness or whatever that may be. I know homelessness is an incredible issue right now, and I just wanted to say that the Housing Authority doesn't really have the capacity or the ability or the resources readily available to assist in that process other than vouchers. But we would certainly like to see what we could do to assist community partners with their endeavors in addressing homelessness. But moving back, some of the concepts we've contemplated with acquisition development. We just recently made an offer on 23 units in Monmouth that were on the market. We worked through our due diligence and unfortunately it did not pan out and we had to back away from the deal. The issue was the volatility in capital markets. The original loan terms had changed over the 30 to 45 days that we were working through our due diligence. We just could not meet the debt service moving forward. And I was uncomfortable putting the agency in a position of having to buy down the loan even further. I don't want to use all the agency's resources to acquire 23 units. So it was a cost benefit analysis that we performed, and unfortunately we had to cut that deal loose. Doesn't mean that we're not still interested in potentially acquiring property if something comes up. It has to be the right property. And in conjunction with that, we'd also love to see the opportunity to buy developable land. There's not a lot out there that's not already secured by whomever owns it now. But some ideas other housing authorities have pursued, and what we'd be interested in is maybe if a local city has some property available, the county itself has property available, the state, ODOT, school districts, anybody and everybody that might have some land available. I know like school districts, they have certain requirements to make sure that they have capacity for future population growth. So there's a lot of communication that would have to happen in that regard, but I'm just putting it out there that the Housing Authority is definitely interested in finding any available land. We have not gone to the point of having an agent do knock and talks and see if people that have land available would be interested in selling, just because we don't have the capacity for that right now. But that's something we may endeavor in the future, is to have a proactive approach to reaching out and seeing if there's landowners that are interested in selling land to the housing authority. Another concept that's been floating around is manufactured housing developments, or manufactured parks. In the state of Oregon, if a manufactured home park is to go on the market, it has to be announced to the housing authority first. And that's just a development that came out of an immense need for these affordable, or for these manufactured home parks to remain affordable. The narrative that I've received is back in the day when mobile home parks were really popular, 70s and 80s, they were built kind of outside the city limits or just adjacent to the city limits. And over the last 30 years, 40 years, the cities have grown. So they've moved into the city limits, and that land is much more desirable now. It may not have been as desirable when the mobile home park was first developed. So if there's any opportunity for a developer to buy those, raise them and put in single family homes or do something else with that property, people are clamoring to do that. Well, it's been realized that these mobile home parks serve a very critical need in affordable housing. And it gives people the opportunity to actually own something and live in something that's affordable. So there's a current push for housing authorities to have the opportunity to participate in acquiring and or developing or maintaining these mobile home parks that are affordable. It would be a whole different arena than what we're used to, but it's something, again, that is kind of a current push for housing authorities to consider.
Are there federal funds for that? I'm aware of the OHCS program for rehabbing mobile home parks, but is there acquisition funds available from the feds?
I don't think it's really reached the federal level yet. I don't know if Jessica has any input on that, but I know the state has a incredible desire to make sure that we maintain these mobile home parks.
Okay.
I don't know if it's reached the federal level yet.
Just curious.
Where we are right now is we definitely have a need to evaluate our capacity. Like I said, we're a very small agency, but we have an incredible need. There's an incredible need for affordable housing out in the community. Right now, we're going through some analysis to see if maybe we need to reevaluate our job descriptions, our positions, our number of staff, the hierarchy, how things flow through the agency. We have 18 full-time employees. As I said, we were without a caseworker for a period of, in total, about 12 months. And it really had an impact on the housing authority operations. So we've been analyzing that, seeing how we can be more competitive in the market and how we might be more adaptive in responding to the needs of our programs. Moving into 2024, we'd like to really analyze where this agency needs to be over the next 5 years. We've never done I've been with the agency for 8 years. We've never done a 5-year strategic plan. I can't find any in the history. I know maybe back at the turn of the century, there was some turmoil at the housing authority, and I think maybe they approached the concept of a 5-year plan, but never really came to fruition. So it's something I would like to see happen here in the near future. And I'm sure the board would be supportive of that process. And then the other areas that we'd like to reach out is strengthening partnerships. Like I say, we have a pretty good partnership with Polk County Family and Community Outreach. But we've heard some feedback that maybe landlords are a little frustrated with the housing authority and the housing choice voucher program. So we have recently put out a survey back at the end of October to kind of get a feel for how we're received in the community, especially amongst our landlords. That survey closed. We received 26 responses out of 106 that were sent out. By and large, they weren't negative. In fact, they were actually pretty positive, but there is some information in them that I think that we could cull out to really improve our operations and enhance our program delivery with the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So those results were just kind of compiled here in the last week or two, and we haven't had a chance to meet as an executive team and talk about how we can make improvements with our program. One other thing we've been working with is there's a local, or it isn't even local, they're out of Florida, but there is an opportunity for funding for what they call a PACE program. And that is kind of like a continuum of care, but they provide services to elderly and or disabled to assist them with maintaining their independent living. And we've offered to provide our support to the entity that's applying for funds with the state for that purpose through Oregon Housing or through Oregon Health Authority, provide support for that entity to receive those funds, namely because we deal with a lot of elderly and disabled people. The majority of our public housing units are one-bedroom units. They're not designated elderly and disabled, but by and large, those are people that live in those units. And we see a lot of people suffering and being unable to live independently. And ultimately, the vast majority of them end up having to move because they just can't continue to live independently. So we would see that as a tremendous opportunity for these individuals to receive the assistance that they need to maintain their housing, not only for the benefit of the Housing Authority not having a vacancy, but also for them to continue to live independently in a stable environment. I'm happy for Jessica to add anything that she would like to add.
No, I think, I mean, it really covers most of the things. I think from the board's perspective, we've really tried to work on advancing the agency forward and finding ways to utilize those vouchers so that the funding is not lost forever. There's still an opportunity to gain that funding back. So through strengthening the community partnerships and ensuring that we're all kind of working in our own lane and not duplicating resources, I think is really important. Understand what the other agencies are doing so that we can maybe piggyback off those efforts and get vouchers out into the community a lot faster. Our goal, according to the 5-year strategic plan and the work done with the PATHS group, is to get the utilization up to 525. So with the assistance of other county resources, we're confident that we can meet those benchmarks and have an opportunity to get that $160,000 back because there still is that time. So that's kind of our biggest focus right now, is getting those resources back, because the loss of permanent resources in Polk County is extremely detrimental. Doing the landlord outreach is huge, understanding where our challenges are. And then part of my choosing to step down from board chair is because I also work for a partner agency. So there's some perceived conflict with HUD because I work for the Salem Housing Authority, and some of the projects that West Valley Housing Authority owns and operates are inside those city limits. And there are opportunities for partnership with other housing agencies like Salem that are bigger and have more resources and have more FTEs, but me being board chair prevents that from happening. So I've made the commitment to step down from my role as of January. And we've been working to fill those positions or get interest so that those positions are lined up so there's no gaps, because there's a lot of work to do. And I feel like this last year has been really beneficial in advancing those kind of forward thinking. Expanding the board, getting those positions filled was huge. And now starting on that strategic work and strategic planning to align with the 5-year plans outlined from the past group, I think is really an important next step. One of the things that could happen by me stepping down is HUD could allow for interagency memorandums of understanding so that essentially we can do some sharing of staff, some sharing of resources. A lot of multi-agency coordination is going on between Polk and Marion County right now. And so it will allow us the freedom to dip into those resources a little bit more without that perceived conflict because I work for another agency. I think it's all great work. It's a great path forward. We understand our baseline, I think now, and where we're viewed negatively or where our shortfalls are or shortcomings, I should say, and ready to kind of plan out to fill those gaps. So I think that's really where it is. It's just moving the agency forward and ensuring that we're all on the same page of what it is our role is, because permanent housing is a key role in that whole continuum of care, because you can assist people transitionally all you want, but if at the end there's no resource to keep them housed permanently, then it's all that money and all that work is for naught. So I think now us coming in and really taking on that lead role is huge, and so grateful for all the work that the agency is doing. Capacity has been such a challenge. COVID was such a challenge to get through, especially with our clients. Seeing a need for more some more resource need for our existing clients that may not have been there before. We're just seeing it's just kind of a change in community. And so trying to adapt to that and move forward, I think has been, I think we have a good path forward. So happy to answer any questions.
So if I can just touch on something she said real quick. So like she said, recapturing that $167,000 of offset. What that looks like is moving into the future, the housing authority will have to go from leasing potential to what HUD calls shortfall, meaning we're overspending. And we're spending ahead of HUD. And we do intend to do that moving into next year. Strategically, it would be best if we do that in third quarter, fourth quarter. But just to put it on your radar that if something comes out that, oh, the West Valley Housing Authority is in shortfall, it's an intentional move because HUD allocates funding based on your last year's performance. So if we're underutilizing our funding, moving into 2024, we're not going to get as much funding. So we have to prove there's this need for additional funding in 2024. So in 2025, they push that funding back up to show or to compensate for the amount of overspending that we undertook in 2024. So shortfall has a negative connotation, but there's a purpose for it. And so does leasing potential. But like I say, we're going to go from, in the pendulum, we're going to go from leasing potential to shortfall, hopefully, if we can push to get a number of vouchers out consistently and show that there's an incredible need for additional funding in Polk County. So I just wanted to clear that up.
But it sounds like when you, I mean, again, that language means apparently a completely different thing to me, because in what we do, it's like we would never overspend.
Right.
And so I'm concerned that the words you're using may be semantic or I mean, overspending really means you're going to spend that money and hope that HUD is going to reimburse at some point out here in the future under shortfall designation.
Right.
It's a big gamble.
Right.
I think trusting the federal government that they're going to follow the rules and actually cover us.
And I would never put the agency in shortfall if we didn't have the resources. We do have reserves. We have $750,000 in unrestricted net position, and we have $350,000 in restricted net position. So we have $1.1 million available to make sure that we can cover those expenses, even if HUD says, no, we're not going to fund you after the fact, which I don't know has ever happened, but
this is all in service to recapture those vouchers and those funding.
Yes.
Attached to those.
Because if we don't.
I don't like the words, but it's
Right.
very normal in the housing authority world.
Yeah. HUD's a whole different animal when it comes to these terms, but yeah, I don't know what my comment was, but I would never do that if we did not have the resources to do that. So in previous years, we've been very successful in squirreling away funds in our reserves. So like I say, we have about $1.1 million in reserves for that purpose. The original intent was to make sure we had funding available if the government couldn't figure out the budget and didn't get the funding to us for 3 months. We wanted to make sure that the whole system didn't collapse in that 3 months while they were working on a continuing resolution, or we went into sequestration like we did back in 2011. So there's a reason that we keep the reserves. I will say that the Portland field office thinks we're a little too conservative with our reserves. So we're following their direction to spend some of those reserves down.
So are all the units filled at this point?
All of the public housing units are occupied. We have about a 4 to 5% vacancy, meaning people move out. We're in the process of turning them over and moving them back in, but we don't have any substantial issue with leasing those units up or keeping them.
So the extra money you couldn't expand was because there was a housing shortage of placement of families that you couldn't.
So one thing about HUD is the funds that you receive have to stay in each program. You can't mix, you can't play with them, you can't do anything with HUD funding other than if it's public housing, it can only be used for public housing. If it's voucher, it can only be used for voucher. So that's one of the reasons we've been looking outside the box to try to move to having more affordable housing units available and or more resources being provided by those affordable housing units, because those aren't restricted and we can be flexible in how we use those.
So with the private owned rentals, what level are the vouchers valued at? And are you having any luck having any of the landlords accepting that amount for rent?
The value depends on the bedroom size, and they follow what we call fair market rents, and those are established by HUD. So HUD does an analysis of each geographical area across the United States and comes up with what they determine to be fair market rents for the bedroom size. And then the housing authority has the opportunity to say, yeah, I agree with that. We'll go at face value, or we don't think it's quite that high. We can go down to 90% of that value. Or we don't think you hit the mark and we can go up to 110% of that value. Right now, we don't think HUD's hit the mark and we're at 110% of that value, which is the most we're allowed to do. So if HUD says a unit is a 2-bedroom unit or a 1-bedroom unit is $1,000, we're funding at $100 or $1,100. 110% of what HUD says the fair market rent is. Yeah.
There we go.
And as I mentioned before, our average HAP expense is about $678. So for each family, the average is we're paying $678 to the landlord on their behalf. And they pay the remainder of the rent.
So back to my question, I'm looking at the dollar values here. Will the local landlords accept these dollar values? How many privately owned apartment building that you're working with landlords that are accepting these values, giving you apartments for family and people placement?
By and large, most landlords find these rents reasonable and in line with what they're charging. There's a few outliers like River's Edge. River's Edge will never touch. Their rents are much too high. They don't fall within the payment standard. I think there's a few more boutique units out there that are charging more in rent and they're garnering, that are receiving it. So they don't have any issue with a need to adjust their rents for the potential of a housing choice voucher client to be able to rent there.
And one of the things you mentioned at the start, somebody comes in and they need help, they need to find the housing unit. Now I know Family and Community Outreach is helping them locate them, but you don't have a list of buildings that are open and available to rent when they walk into your office looking for that placement?
Yes, we do compile a list every week. Our receptionist goes through and does a search of all available units on the market as of each Wednesday morning. And she'll put together a list of available units. And when somebody comes in and says, I just can't find anything, do you have any resources? We provide them with that list.
Okay.
I will say in the past, it's been so competitive, but by the time that person calls that landlord with that unit, they're like, I've got 5 people already with applications. We have seen a slight change in that over the last month or two. So I don't know if that's a trend we can see moving forward, but there has been a little bit of a lull in the rental market right now. So we've had a few landlords reach out to us, say, hey, do you have anybody available to rent this unit from me? Which is a first in the last 5 years.
I know there's certain areas they have a lot more restricted housing, so the shortage is a lot greater. If somebody outside of Polk County wants to move here, they're eligible for this, correct?
Yes.
But if somebody can't get our money and take it to another county, and I think you explained that very
So the
well.
problem we were experiencing is predominantly King County, so up around the Seattle area. We had people applying to our wait list because their wait list is closed and probably 12 years long. Meaning they have to wait 12 years to get up to the top of the list. We had a lot of families from there getting our voucher and immediately wanting to what they call port it back to where they live. So they never moved from King County. So we've done all the work to get them the voucher. They use the voucher back in King County and King County absorbs them, meaning that we don't even get the benefit of spending that resource on them anymore. And plus, conversely, we don't really want to be supporting households outside of Polk County. Our purpose is to provide affordable housing for Polk County residents. Thank you.
So my takeaway today is, I think, three significant things. One is that you, like everyone else in any business, are experiencing staff shortages, and no, I haven't heard the expectation for that to change anytime soon. You're seeing I'd say a dramatic culture change, apparently, in the clientele and how much work they're willing to do to help themselves. And I mean, again, you use the term affordable housing in everything you do, and I appreciate that that's your terminology. But I call it assisted housing because it's only affordable to the extent that the taxpayers are going to assist to pay for it. So that's the reality. And my expectation is, from what I'm hearing here, is that we have fewer and fewer property owners that are interested in participating in these programs across the board. So that's my takeaway. And, so while I appreciate that you've mentioned that the governor's objective in affordable housing is 36,000 new units per year for 10 years, for the record, very, very lofty goal. It also adds competition to what you're doing, right? And makes it much more challenging for property owners, landowners, to consider how would they work with your agency versus how would they just work with the developer, to build, if they have available dirt, just to build homes that they can sell. I mean, I'm always interested in trying to understand that dynamic. I mean, again, as somebody who owns farmland that's not able to be developed, and I'm okay with that, that, anybody who owns land inside an urban growth boundary or in a city limits in an area where they can actually develop multiple housing sites, I'm always curious about why would they build that for these programs unless they get some assurance from the government that they're going to get paid over a long period of time, and including all of their expenses for maintenance. And my understanding each time I hear you talk about it and others talk about HUD is constant restrictions that limit your flexibility, limit your ability to actually do the things that a landowner needs to have done. And ultimately, in my household, our takeaway when we listen to these stories and we watch them on news and so forth is that a lot of these properties end up being under-maintained, and their standard of living is much lower than you would expect it to be, because there's just not enough money for them to be able to do all the things that need to happen. So, and I'm always supportive of the philosophy of divesting the housing authority from owning some of these properties. Like you talked about, you've got a half an acre on a piece of property. Why would you do that? It's like, yeah, I get, hopefully there was an expectation we're going to build more on that piece of dirt, but that didn't happen, right? So yeah, I wouldn't want to own it as a landlord. So those are my takeaways, and I am listening carefully to what you're saying about engaging with others out there. I don't mind telling you on the record, I am not a big fan of merging, and for a number of reasons, but the biggest one is I worry, as it has been over history, Polk County ends up at the tail end. And I am not interested in incorporating our housing authority with the city of Salem or any other large organization that leaves us at the tail end. So I could be convinced as time goes on if there's a real model. And it left me also thinking, so what are the best practices out there for housing authorities across the country? Don't know that necessarily Oregon is the best model for that. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but are there successful housing authorities across this country?
I think there are. I think that I agree with you in the fact that I would like to see those resources stay here in Polk County. I live here. And so this is where I would like them to see. So I don't think that merging is necessarily the answer either. I think that sharing of resources while we're all struggling with staff is one of the nice pieces. Is that, for example, we were just asked by another property that's having trouble with lease up. Is there anyone who can come out? Because we speak the same HUD language, and which is a very complicated language at times, and it's hard to navigate. To have qualified people that can jump in and assist is a really good option for the smaller housing authorities. Josephine and Jackson County work together down south. Some and they don't merge. It's more of the memorandums of understanding, like, hey, if you need help, we can do this. If you need help, we can do this. One of the nice things is that we can do each other's inspections. So potentially we have more inspectors in Salem. They could come out and inspect the units quicker, you know, things like that, which we had to give up because I was on the board. So those things can come back where we won't have to try to reach out to Lincoln County or Yamhill County or somewhere further. It's more efficient to do it with some of the neighboring ones. But I think there are a lot of models that are getting better. And I think as the housing authority does change away from just this HUD bucket of money that's super restricted and having those flexibilities with some of those other funding opportunities, that's where the success comes from, because you can balance and you can fill a program that has more need today and then another program that has a more need tomorrow, without having to try to make it work within the confines of the HUD regulations. So I think the most successful housing authorities are ones that have been successful in diversifying their portfolio. By going out and creating affordable housing, which act as their own single asset entities and their own businesses, basically, and don't have to wait for the election to determine what percentage of allocation of funding you're getting from HUD. That's really scary for the staff. It creates a lot of fear. We've had a few really good years in our funding, but who's to say that, you know, the next time we get our funding, we've seen as low as 67%. That means furlough, that means losing staff, that means going the wrong direction. But if we can take those funds that we've set aside that are unrestricted, we can keep that staff through those years that are a little bit lower funded, dip into the reserves, maybe in a smaller amount though we would have to if we only had federal funds. So I completely agree. Federal funds are very challenging. We make that determination when we go out and do new developments, like, are we going to put federal funds in this project or not? Because we know that impacts the timeline, the cost, the time to deliver to the community. So all of those factors. Yeah, so I think the most successful ones are the ones that have done that diversification in their portfolios. And I'd love to see Polk County be a part of that. But strategically, of course, because there's only a limited amount of staff and limited amount of resources and knowledge here. But I think it can be done. I'm hopeful.
So previously I worked for Jackson County Housing Authority for 15 years. We were the second housing authority in the nation to divest completely of their public housing. And the reason we did so was our leadership at the time realized that this just is not a tenable situation moving forward, that you're reliant solely on the federal government to determine how they're going to fund these programs. So we divested of public housing, and Jackson County is an incredibly successful housing authority. They develop, when I first started in 2000, they had 438 units. Today they have 1,570. So they've been developing at least 50 units a year for the last decade or more.
There's been massive disinvestment from HUD in the public housing arena. The voucher program too is underfunded. My question on the RAD conversions, converting from public housing to market-based Section 8 is those public housing programs are serving people at very low incomes, right? 0 to 30% AMI. Isn't that kind of the
public housing is considered low income, so it's up to 80%.
It is.
Now, that doesn't mean
who are we serving?
the vast majority of who we're serving is at 30% or yeah.
So what is the effect on those folks who have very limited means to collect more income, right? This could be people with disabilities, seniors on fixed income. What is it going to mean for them during this process if we're successful?
So under public housing, it's basically the same basic premise as the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We analyze their income, we determine what their adjusted gross monthly income is, and then they're required to pay 30% of that towards their rent in public housing.
Regardless of what that is.
Correct.
Okay,
If they make $0 and it's zero,
okay,
and they don't pay anything, well, we have a threshold, they have to pay $50 in minimum rent unless they can prove a hardship, but and that's the same as the Housing Choice Voucher Program. So there's no real net change or impact to the client, whether they go from public housing to Section 8 or a project-based voucher.
that's really important.
They're both income-based.
Yeah, great. And I appreciate your attention to the loss of vouchers. I know, you know, being that underutilized is not ideal, and I appreciate that you are seeing that as a focus. Especially during a time when the need for these housing units is increasing, right? Rents have increased dramatically in the last 3-4 years. And our housing stock hasn't increased all that much. So I appreciate you also looking into getting into the game of development and increasing the housing stock for those folks under AMI. So yeah, in terms of so I have a question about the process. When somebody comes up on the list, it's a 2 to 3 year waiting list. I understand that's short, relatively, but it's a long time in people's lives. A lot can change there. I don't think it can be attributed to apathy completely, and that's evidenced by the fact that we've utilized some housing navigation services through FCO and increased that rate of utilization based on their process. So what is the process when somebody's name comes up on the list? So how are they notified?
So the process of eligibility is we determine we're going to do some number of pool, what we call a pool. And that's generally we do 50 to 100 to 150 families we pull off the wait list because we know what the net outcome is going to be at the end. We want to hit a certain number of vouchers being put out on the street. And based on past performance, we know, okay, in order to get 30 vouchers out, we're going to have to pull 150 families because as you work through that natural process of attrition, you get down to that 30. So we'll say we pull 150 people. It's person 1 through 150 on the wait list, unless there's targeted funding that we're reaching down into. We send them a letter stating that you are up at the top of the list.
Based on the address I gave you 3 years ago?
Correct.
Okay, that's probably a systemic issue.
Okay. You're right. And I'd like to address that. We do it via mail just because we have to be able to track that we indeed sent the correspondence. They do wait on the wait list for 3 years. It is their responsibility to update us with their new address.
Okay.
And to maintain veracity and validity of our wait list, we do an annual purge. And that process is we take everybody on the wait list, take their current address, send them a letter saying, we are conducting our annual purge. If you are no longer interested in the program, or if you do not respond, we will pull you from the wait list. So they have to actively send us back the form saying that they are interested in maintaining their status on the wait list. We are currently doing that. We do that every October. We sent out the letters and we're currently processing what's come back through the ranks. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that did not respond. And over the next few months, we'll get a lot of calls saying, well, where am I on the wait list? And we'll say, you never responded to the purge letter. You were purged from the system. And then they then have the right to request an informal hearing or review. And then we go through that process. But by and large, if they didn't respond, unless they can prove to us that they did not get the mail or we failed to get the mail to them, there's not much they can do, which, to be honest with you, I think sucks. But I don't know how to address that. I don't know how. I mean, I don't know if we could augment it with doing text blasts or emails, but we have to be very cautious to make sure that we're reaching everybody in the same context, in the same fashion. So there's no potential for somebody saying there was discrimination or they got this, I didn't. So there is a challenge there. I will say that I think the purge kind of keeps it present in people's minds that they have to maintain their current address, so that we can correspond to them when something comes up, like the potential of offering them an eligibility letter. But they receive the letter. They have up to 10 days to respond to that letter. If they don't respond within the 10 days, we usually wait about 14 days and we send a second letter. So we add an additional 4 days, we send a second letter, allowing them an additional 10 days to respond. If they don't respond to that, then they're told they're removed. They're considered ineligible. So that's kind of the process.
Well, hopefully if this contract with FCO continues that, the number of households making contact with the resource center, it's fairly high. It's a one-stop shop.
Right.
So integrating in that system, I think, is going to yield better results going forward. I think I have one more question. Let's see. So good news on the project choice vouchers, project-based vouchers. You said you're looking to work with other landlords and property owners to utilize those. Have you worked with Polk CDC? They just got funding, full funding for the Carson Commons project. Part of that program will serve young adults exiting the foster care system. It's in partnership with Community Action Agency. I'm just curious if you've reached out to them to sort of dedicate some of those units for project-based.
I have not reached out to them recently. They are on my short list of
Okay.
partners to make contact with. I will say that in the past, we have talked with them about project basing dash vouchers on their Freedom property. But it just couldn't come to fruition because of the semantics involved in at what point they owned the property and at what point they had a development plan. There's little nuance differences in how you can place project-based vouchers. It has to be at a certain time, and we just didn't meet that window. And then we haven't had a discussion since then. So that's been, probably 5 years now. We didn't have that discussion. But they are definitely at the top of my mind as far as a potential party that would be interested in project-based vouchers.
I think they are. Just having those dedicated units fixed.
We would love to have that opportunity as well. We don't have the ability to just determine who's going to receive the project-based vouchers. We have to put out a request for proposals. We have to go through a competitive process, and HUD has to bless it. We don't even have the full authority to bless the actual allocation of project-based vouchers.
And you said those project-based, those are in addition to the standard program, right?
Under normal project-based, no, they come out of our baseline.
Oh, they do. So that's
how it would enhance our ability to get more vouchers out, because those units cannot be rented without that voucher attached to it.
Super. Well, thank you both for being here. Jessica, I'm glad we were able to fill one of the seats on the board with somebody who's very, very knowledgeable about the issue. And sounds like we'll have another vacancy. We are going to work on a kind of an updated process for recruiting folks for those, which will involve in part existing board members to advance folks to the Board of Commissioners. But we'll keep you updated on that process, and hopefully we can find somebody to fill your shoes, which are very hard to fill. I'm glad that you're still in the mix here and going to help kind of enhance some of the partnerships with other housing authorities. I think that's smart.
Christian can't get rid of me that easy.
Well, I'd like in front of all of you to express my appreciation for Jessica and her dedication to the board over the last 6 years. I really appreciate her insight, her knowledge. It's been nice having somebody that has a little more knowledge of what HUD means, because a lot of our board members, and I don't mean to discredit them in any way, shape, or form, just never really fully understand the full mechanism of what is HUD and a housing authority. So I really appreciate her perspective and being part of the board. So
great. Thanks, Jessica. And thanks for your help with paths as well.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.
great.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
All right. Good discussion. Do we have any non-listed items we need to address? Sir, going once. All right. With that, we'll adjourn.
Great.
What's that?
Since I've seen those,
They're way more reasonable.
really, yeah, $700
Well, it was
4 years ago.